is Good Morning Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda.
Good morning once again and welcome to the Hour of 8. As we had earlier informed you that we will be handling the fight against corruption. Last week on the 10th, it was International Human Rights Day, and of course, we saw so much being said, so much being done in regards to the fight against corruption. This week, we are honored to have the Deputy IGG with us in studios, and that is Dr. Patricia Achan Okwiria. You're most welcome to our studios, Doctor.
Thank you very much, and good morning, viewers. Thank you. And
of course, we told our members that later on, they'll be part of the show, hosting you in a way that they'll be sending in questions on our WhatsApp number that is going to be coming up on your screen to the Deputy IGG. All the questions, and she'll be answering them. So you simply go to our WhatsApp number, which is 0709 60 2592, and I'll be reading out all the questions to the Deputy IGG, but you can also send the traditional SMS. Still, we'll be reading out those questions to the Deputy IGG and our social media platforms, that is on Facebook and Twitter, and those streaming on YouTube. All these questions and comments will be answered by the Deputy IGG. But also joining me on set is Gilbert Sendugwa, who happens to be the Africa Senior Regional Manager, that is Coast, and the Executive Director of Africa. This is an institution that also looks at how best we can promote transparency in the construction sector. I'll begin with the Deputy IGG. When we talk about corruption, many a times we've seen our government having commitment to fight corruption, and the lead agency here is your office. To begin with, what seems to be hindering us to register the zero tolerance to corruption, which we committed ourselves? That was in 2009, which, remember, was the slogan, zero tolerance for corruption.
Thank you very much, moderator. First of all, I bring greetings from the Inspector General of Government, Honorable Betty Kamya Turomwe, and Deputy Inspector General of Government, Mrs. Anne Twinomgisha Muhere. Now, the fight against corruption in this country has been quite a challenge. As you realize, corruption is like an amoeba. It changes forms and shapes. It is so intricate. And like the president declared it a battle, when you go for war, you need to identify your enemies. You need to strategize. And if you look at the zero tolerance to corruption policy, it was one of those strategies that was put in place to help the interagency forum, the agencies in the fight against corruption, to be able to deal with the problem squarely. Corruption has been a problem, and strategizing on corruption, the agencies involved have come up with different mechanisms of dealing with it. Others are into the prosecution, others are into the awareness creation, others are into the investigations, and so on. If you look at the Inspectorate of Government as a lead agency in the fight against corruption, its mandate is clearly laid out within the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. And our mandate is basically to investigate, to prosecute, to create awareness. We have the leadership code to ensure that all leaders are accountable and are able to declare their assets in time. So that is basically what those institutions do as a synopsis. But you find that the fight against corruption requires new strategies in fighting corruption, new innovative ways of dealing with it, because it keeps changing forms and shapes like an amoeba. When you come up with a strategy like the zero tolerance corruption policy, some people out there trying to undo and saying, how shall we beat this strategy? You have heard about the lifestyle audit. Some people out there trying to say, well, how can we beat this? We have a strategy to do more of the prevention, to create awareness among Ugandans to deal with the problem and encourage them to come out and shun and hate corruption and report cases of corruption to the Inspectorate of Government, so that together we own the fight against corruption, and we can be able to investigate, we can be able to prosecute, we can be able to deal with the cases as they come. Thank you very much.
Let's also understand, before I move to my next guest, you've talked how complicated this is, the fight against corruption. But when we look at what government is investing in the fight of corruption, and actually what government is reaping in terms of money is refunded, many experts have said maybe there isn't value for money. That we have so many institutions fighting corruption, the budgets are huge, but when we look at what we are recovering, it seems maybe it's not a profitable business if it were to be a business.
Personally, I don't agree with you in that regard, because when you look at our country, if the country strategizes to prioritize the fight against corruption and we are willing to deal with it, then we will actually get to deal with it. In terms of recoveries of assets, we have the Asset Recovery Fund, which is manned by the IG. We have got cases of people who have chosen to return back. They're saying, come on, for me, don't take me to court, do not prosecute me, because I am ready to pay back. And that is happening. So, like in war, you've seen the budget of this country. You know how much goes to defense, how much we invest in national security, how much we've invested in the fight against HIV, how much we've invested in the fight against COVID. I think corruption needs that kind of approach. We need to give corruption a face and come up with a strategy to deal with it. We need to unmask it, and then we need to invest in it, and then we'll be able to recover. So I believe it is something that needs a concerted effort by all agencies, by the government of Uganda. We need to plan for it, and then we need to give it priority, even in terms of budgeting. And believe you me, we will be able to recover enough monies that are being lost into corruption. Look at the effect of corruption. When people are saying there are no drugs in hospital, and we witness citizens passing on because there are no drugs in hospital. Look at a situation where doctors have gone on a strike, and they're saying, well, we need our monies paid, and that money is not readily available. Look at a situation where we have poor roads, poor services in the countryside. So if Ugandans come together and own up this fight against corruption, then we will be able to deal with it squarely, and corruption will be wiped out of this country. Thank you very much.
Gilbert, you're so much interested in the infrastructure sector as CAST, following it up. First, let's understand, why do we see you people more interested in this particular sector of this country in terms of promotion of transparency?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chivirango. Very good morning to your dear viewers who are participating in this program. Let me start by congratulating Patricia and the new team at the Inspectorate of Government upon being appointed to these respected offices, which are crucial, for national development. In the NRM manifesto, corruption is mentioned 17 times. So that tells you that it's some kind of pain that is felt, that if, and appreciated, that if that manifesto is to be implemented and achieved, then corruption has to be addressed. Now, for us at COST and the Africa Freedom of Information Center, we're interested in this topic, and particularly so in the infrastructure sector, because studies after studies, whether it is the World Bank, whether it is the Inspectorate of Government here, or the OECD, all of them have said that corruption is very high, especially in as far as public infrastructure and procurement is concerned. And our national budget here in Uganda, over 32% of the national budget every year is spent through infrastructure development or infrastructure procurements. So if this is fixed, if corruption in infrastructure procurement is fixed, then we are going to see a huge difference, that is going to bring value for the people. One of the things that we have done this year is the Infrastructure Transparency Index, which is a study that we have done in 5 countries around the world, including Uganda. This study was based on 4 dimensions that are critical in transparency and, in fact, the fight against corruption. The first dimension was institutional framework, and institutional framework, including laws and policies to enable promotion of transparency and accountability. The second dimension was on access to information. The third was on citizen participation, and then lastly on processes. Unfortunately, in the case of Uganda, the findings don't seem to be good, and this explains why the fight against corruption will continue to be difficult unless these issues are looked at. In terms of enabling environment, which was the first dimension, looking at laws and policies, the score was 48%, quite low, but certainly better than other dimensions. Access to information, this is the information, public information that citizens receive, on 18%. And then on citizen participation, 13%, and then capacity and processes, only 13.5%. So you can see, you can't fight corruption without people. You can't fight corruption in the darkness. You can't fight corruption when laws are not in place or laws are not being implemented. One of the things that we see in this is that overall, the score was 20.8% overall on all dimensions. And the top agencies that performed best were Kampala Capital City Authority, which scored only 62%, followed by UNRA, 58%, and then Office of the Prime Minister, 48%. If this is in class, you'll see,
there are no distinctions.
And then also, on the lower end, you have Bukedia District, you have Ministry of Gender and other agencies. These were scoring zeros. And in each agency, the index was looking at, we covered 30 agencies, and then 2 projects in each of the agencies. And this was the score. So I think at Coast our invitation is to the Inspectorate of Government, as the lead agency in the fight against corruption, to work with citizens, to mobilize citizens, because these are critical in the fight against corruption. Number 2, to promote effective implementation of the Access to Information Act and all other laws, including the PPDA Act, that emphasize transparency, that emphasize government agencies disclosing information so that people have the information they need in order for them to participate in the fight against corruption. People have information they need in order for them to inform or report any cases of corruption. And once that happens, I think we are going to see a difference.
Kicking it there at the level of people having information, that brings me to Dr. Patricia. Recently, we saw the anti-corruption agencies in this country coming together to launch the lifestyle audit campaign. The biggest question here was that as people are declaring their assets, as requested by your office, this is not made public. How is the public going to partner with your office to ensure that they can be able to identify, report to you some of this extra or not matching wealth that people have amassed as a result of corruption?
Thank you very much. When you look at asset recovery vis-a-vis the access to information, asset recovery is one of the strategies we have within the Inspectorate of Government to ensure that we do not lose, government doesn't lose a lot of money to corruption. And how do we check this out? We have got the Directorate of Leadership Code, where we encourage all leaders, all public servants to declare their assets to the Inspectorate. And when they do so, we actually do verifications. We now have a roadmap for verifications to be able to to tell exactly whether people declared rightly, whether they over-declared or under-declared, or even those who did not declare. And remember that now we have the Leadership Code Tribunal under the chairperson of Dr. Rose Segawa Karugonjo. The Leadership Code Tribunal has begun work. It has been working, it's over a year now, and we give them cases of those leaders who have not declared, those who have under-declared, and those who are in breach of the Leadership Code Act. You talked about access to information. We have got the Access to Information Act, which says all citizens have a right to access information in the hands of the public, in hands of public institutions, as long as that information is not going to jeopardize the security of this country. Now, when you look at the corruption in this country, you find that corruption has become a pandemic. Where things have reached, we will get to a point where this information may have to be shared on a case-by-case basis, because one, we want to completely discourage corruption. We want all citizens to come out and own the fight against corruption. We want to exhibit the face of corruption in every classroom. We want every living room, every place of worship, every place of entertainment, even in the bedroom. Corruption should be fought. Everyone can recognize and despise this corruption. And we cannot do this secretly. Therefore, we have got to do this openly so that citizens embrace the fight against corruption. You talked about these laws. We have got a very good legal framework, and we've got institutional framework as well in the fight against corruption. What needs to be done is to disseminate these laws so that everybody out there gets to know what is corruption, what are the offenses related to corruption, what are the penalties, how can we discourage corruption from happening. In the public structures, Mr. Gilbert Sendugwa has talked about it. In the area of procurement, we need to ensure that even the procurement cycle, people are sieving and seeing where are the gaps and filling up the gaps so that corruption is completely discouraged. In the inspectorate, we have come up with a new innovative way of ensuring that anti-corruption is mainstreamed in all government agencies, departments, and ministries. Why are we saying this? Because we know that within the ministries, the leadership, the ministers know which areas have got weaknesses. So they can undertake to have their own internal mechanism of dealing with corruption internally. We know that each ministry should have a comprehensive corruption preventive strategy so that they are able to look at the human resource areas, they are able to do performance management, they are able to improve in the fight against corruption. And in so doing, by the way... To what extent
does your office go into ensuring that this is being done?
Well, our office has got a number of directorates. You've heard about the Directorate of Ombudsman Affairs. It is responsible for ensuring that standards are met among the public servants and civil servants to ensure that people do not just leave their jackets in office and do not report for duty in time. We have scenarios, for instance, someone earns a full monthly salary, but he does not measure up to. He's not keeping time, he's not at his desk at the right time, but when that salary delays or does not come, he makes the loudest noise out there. So we want to say that, hey, if you're a civil servant, if you're a public servant, you need to be responsible, be in time at your desk, be able to produce output. Because remember, someone can be at his desk and is on WhatsApp and social media
present
and not,
but absent.
Yes, and not performing. So we want performance measurement so that everybody can be accountable, everybody can be able to measure up to the expectations of that organization. Everybody can work with integrity, minimum supervision, where you say, because I'm patriotic and I love my country, I'll be able to put in my best shot to produce output without necessarily being watched around. So that is the responsibility of the Directorate of Ombudsman Affairs. But in the Inspectorate, we have a number of other directorates that are doing that work.
Well, I go back to Gilbert. Gilbert, you've talked about empowering the public. But the biggest question here is the corrupt are sophisticated, they are complicated. The IG has just told us that these are complicated people. Fighting corruption is not an easy thing. So how then do we empower this public? People that only see graders, only see people with a helmet, sophisticated technology. How do you empower them to be able to understand that this matter is not the right? This content, this is how the road shouldn't be. How do we get the public up the game of being able to understand, being able to track, trace, then report to the office of the IGG?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. Indeed, we see a big mismatch from the work that we do both at Coast and AFIC between the intention of government through the expressions of the Inspectorate of Government, the senior leadership, the NRM Manifesto and the rest, with the practice. Now, our monitoring of infrastructure projects in particular in communities indicate that when a school is being built in a community, the head teacher is not given a copy of the contract. The school management committee is not given a copy of the contract. No member of the community knows anything about these projects. The same in the health sector. The health in charge of the health center or hospital where construction is taking place, they have no clue about the project that is being established at their center, and neither do the health unit management committees. So, and you can't fight corruption in darkness. Whoever is the contracting agency should disclose this information, make sure that every stakeholder at project level is informed about what the project is about and what their role is. In our monitoring, people have told us that on a daily basis, this was in Ntungamo, but also most recently in Mbare, that on a daily basis, they see things going wrong on projects, government projects, but they don't know where to report. These are people, like in Ntungamo, this was the chairman of LC1. So you can imagine, people see things going wrong, but because they have no information on what they're supposed to do, where they're supposed to report, or even what the project is about, they have nothing to do. So the critical thing for the Inspectorate and all government agencies that have the intention of fighting corruption, they have to promote public access to information on these projects. The second thing is to rebuild trust. Our index shows that there is lack of trust, and this is not I mean, where you have people not having information, where you have people not participating in government programs, then there's going to be a deficit of trust, which means that even well-intentioned people who would want to do something, who would want to report, wrongdoing, are not able to do that because they don't trust. Years back in 2014, the person who was sitting in Madame Patricia's office said the president was the biggest whistleblower. Now, the president, I guess there is no time when he is likely to be asked to pay a bribe. So for him to be the biggest whistleblower and citizens are not whistleblowing shows, a complete lack of awareness or lack of trust in public institutions that are supposed to fight corruption. They may fear that when they report, there's going to be consequences for them. Or they may say that even if we report, it's not going to make a difference. So rebuilding trust of citizens in public institutions is going to be very critical if the government is going to win the war against corruption and implement the NRM Manifesto. And
I'll kick it from there. I want to bring in Dr. Patricia. When we talk about trust in these institutions, many a times people know, actually. That's why for me, I'm happy with lifestyle audit. Because even when you move around the city or any part, they'll tell you, so-and-so is building this arcade. There is a name behind the name we are seeing. But what has led to unsuccessful reporting or even prosecution. Yet when you go out there in the public, for them, they know. They will tell you that Kirabo works at UBC. There is no way this young man could be owning such a posh home. They know. But when you tell them, what have you done? Why is the missing link?
Thank you very much, moderator. Like, I'll pick from where Gilbert stopped. The issue of trust is very, very significant. If you have trust in the systems, if you have trust in the laws and policies in place, then you will be able to readily own up the fight against corruption. One of the strategies we have brought up in the inspectorate is to try to rebuild that trust, to try to encourage the citizens to come out and own the fight against corruption. That's why we're saying, Banange tukube kundulu. Let us make noise about this thing. Let us shun corruption, because corruption is one of the major obstacles that undermines our economic development in this country, that has eaten up and eroded most of the projects we have. We're encouraging citizens out there, when we talk about information sharing, to be involved in planning, day-to-day planning, right at the parish, at local government, to be involved in planning for projects which directly affect them, so that they own up, so that they can come up and monitor these projects. We have tried to recruit community monitors out there. If you see the structure for the zero tolerance corruption policy in Uganda, we want everybody to be involved, including religious leaders, the local leaders, at the grassroots. We want everybody to be involved. And we are saying, do not keep silent. Take action. Because at the end of the day, if you look at who is the victim here, it is the ordinary citizen. We want everybody to take action and report any case of suspected corruption to the Inspectorate of Government, so that we can take action. Because if the corrupt activity is not reported, then you realize that we continue to lose. If the corrupt activity is not unchecked, then the country loses a lot. So we are telling citizens, let us wake up. Let us wake up and hate and shun corruption and come out and report cases of corruption, so that we take action. And if we do not give feedback to the community, that's another area which is very, very significant. If there is no feedback, if they see that we have not taken any action, then the people out there will basically withdraw. But we are saying, let us own this fight against corruption. Please come out and report cases of corruption to the inspectorate, so that we take action, so that we prosecute, so that we investigate, so that something is done and we recover these resources that are being lost out. And touching on the lifestyle audit again, it is basically talking about promoting accountability. Everybody must be accountable to one another. Everybody must be his brother's keeper. If you know someone has got a lot of wealth which is not commensurate to his well-known sources of income, automatically that is an area ripe for corruption. There should be a question mark. That's why you and I should be able to explain that, you know, this car I bought, I saved money from this project. It is commensurate to my well-known sources of income. I obtained a loan. I got a top-up loan to be able to do this. That is accountability. We want Ugandans to be responsible, to be more accountable, and to be able to report cases of corruption.
Well, there's been this belief among the public that your office hasn't done much as far as handling the big thieves. That more so we see the petty, and there is craving to see the big fish also face the wrath of the law. Are there untouchables?
Well, I am now 2 months in the office. I do not believe in that issue of being untouchable, or the issue of the big fish, because the laws in Uganda apply equally to all citizens. And if we are following the rule of law, then it should not discriminate. It should deal with you and I equally, and not discriminate and categorize and say, these are the big fish, these are the silver fish, the so-called mukenes. The law acts equally across. And you will realize from the kind of cases we are receiving today, we are receiving cases from all citizens, the small and big equally. You might have followed on the press lately that we have been touching on all areas, you know, and we want to have this roadmap on verification, and you'll see that we are even checking on the leaders, the top leadership. We are going to do verification of ministers. We are going to touch on the accounting officers, the permanent secretaries, the chief administrative officers, and go following that roadmap to be able to do verifications. So we are not looking at this issue discriminatively. We are saying the law applies equally to citizens, big or small, because we do not apply discriminatively. Thank you very much.
Well, allow me now go to messages from our viewers. There are really plenty, so many of them. But I hope the IGG will be able, the deputy will be able to respond to many as they come. But also, if I don't read your message, some are similar in nature. I'll begin with, please give us your name. One said, I got to realize, okay. Good morning, this is Musawo Kasho from Palisa. And he says, I got to realize that one doesn't have money, then they don't get a job. So for this person is saying corruption is to that extent that now people must pay even to get jobs. Wondering if you're aware of that. We have Minister Ogwang received a lot of corruption, but what plans do you have to follow up these cases of the big fish in local governments? Remember when he was touring, his tour and all the people he brought to book and all that. So he's asking, what is your office doing as far as that? Dr. Patricia has mentioned many places where corruption should be fought, but she has forgotten the church where corruption is rampant. All cases of corruption in church should be reported and handled by state institutions such since church assets are public funds. That is Babu Paul. Thanks for the program. I am Mbasi Amon of Kasese. Where corruption has reached in Uganda needs an action of death penalty to those proved guilty. Secondly, the staff fighting corruption should first dilute the political strong impunity that the corrupt have, if not to forget better results at the end of the day. So this person talks about impunity, that maybe some people when it comes to that, but also the area of ensuring that the staff act independently. Think a question to your office. There are times maybe when independency has not been seen. Thanks for the program. I am Okembaso. I read your message. Let's give us another person an opportunity. Good morning, UBC and the IGGs. The only way to fight corruption is to kill the victim, because government officials are the worst victims, or people advocating for death here in terms of corruption. Given the existence of the office of the IGG depends solely on the existence of corruption, how then should we expect zero corruption environment? Wouldn't this be like biting off the fingers that feed you, your office, doctor? According to this person, corruption is one of the other area. Doesn't government realize that if one doesn't have money, then a job is a problem? Well, this is also similar to that. Okay, please do not call on this line. Kindly do not call this line. It is only for WhatsApp and also text messages. Otherwise, you make reading the messages a problem every time you're calling. Let me now move to some of the SMSs that have also come in here. And we have, unless we find rough policies to corruption guys like hanging the corrupt, I see no hope in encountering the corruption vice. I am Gilbert. Thank you for your message. We have, please don't, well, let me just end at that, but please kindly do not call on this line. You can't read the message while calls are also coming in. You're making it hard for us to read the messages. Let's first look at some of the messages that have been sent in. Many looking at a death penalty. Are the laws not sufficient enough to fight corruption in this country? Should we advocate for death?
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you viewers out there for those very brilliant questions. I will begin by touching on the person who talked about corruption in the church. Like we said, corruption now changes forms and shapes like an amoeba. It happens all over the country, whether in churches or in mosques. You have seen the corrupt welcomed and well received in church. They bring this big contribution and they're given a special seat at the front, and they're even blessed and said, well, may God give you more. And the man goes back and probably brings more. And same applies to the mosque as well. But we are saying everybody must own this fight against corruption, including the church leaders. We should be able to find out, how did you get this? Where did you get it from? You're bringing it to the house of God. How are you bringing it here? So I think it's about responsibility and self-accountability as well, and working right with God. I want to add to the person who said the corrupt victim should be killed. You will recall during the Bible times in Acts chapter 5, the story of Ananias and Sapphira. This person promises to bring money to church for ministry, and he diverts the money. You remember Summary execution by God himself? The man was cast to death, and his wife also followed. So if there are 1 or 2 cases treated this way, I believe Ugandans will hate and shun corruption. But nevertheless, the grace of God is sufficient. It is time for us to examine ourselves and look at those areas where there is corruption, where there are weaknesses, and change and repent and make a people of a difference. Minister Ogwang has handled cases, has been following up cases in the countryside. Those cases, most of them are referred to our office for better management, for further investigation. There are cases that have been handled by Lieutenant Colonel Nakalema, some of which have also ended up in our office for better management. So we work in partnership. We work as a team with all the anti-corruption agencies. That's why we keep referring to the interagency forum, the anti-corruption agencies of government. We partner with one another in the fight against corruption. Corruption basically requires a positive attitude. If we change our mindset as citizens in this country, if we become more patriotic, if we can appreciate that we are suffering because of the effects of corruption and would be able to save a lot of money in this economy if we dealt with this corruption squarely, then we would own up the fight and deal with it. Someone talked about zero tolerance to corruption. How can we say zero tolerance yet we are getting paid and we need to survive and things like that? Well, we need to be contented with what it is we are getting paid. Our forefathers used to earn even far much little money, but they were able to raise us up to make us what we are today without necessarily being corrupt. So what is it that we cannot do together as Ugandans? Let us love our country. Let us be more patriotic. Let us own up this fight against corruption so that together we can make a difference. Access to Information Act, we need everybody to access information to do with the national plans, to do with what is happening at the grassroots, to do with priorities. Then we shall be able to monitor these projects. So I call upon all Ugandans who are watching, be keen on what is happening. If you see any shoddy work, please come out and report this case to the Inspectorate of Government. We have got 16 offices in the countryside. Approach any of those regional offices and report these cases so that we take them on and take action. People are saying, well, our office is not biting, our office is weak, our office is actually doing a lot of work. One thing about the Inspectorate, we do a lot behind the scenes as well. You have heard us arresting district officials, you have heard us interdicting some of them, you have heard us prosecuting some of them, and there are so many cases in the anti-corruption court, both of big and small fish, and we are dealing with all those within the Inspectorate. So let us join hands in the fight against corruption so that we make a difference in this country. And we believe that if Ugandans own this fight against corruption, then this country will change and improve and will be a better place to live in, and will be proud citizens of this
Gilbert, talking about Ugandans owning the fight, you came out with a number of recommendations that if followed, then we can better attain results in the fight against corruption. Let's look at some of these recommendations.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator, for this. One of the things that we have recommended is for strict implementation of the Access to Information Act and all laws that provide for disclosure. The fight against corruption begins with transparency. When there is no transparency, as our index has shown, then there cannot be wins against corruption. you can't fight corruption in darkness. So that is our first call.
When you talk about transparency, just to be more clear, what are you referring to? Because earlier on you said a school is being constructed, but right from the headmaster, they don't have details of the contract. We've had sometimes where we hear, these are exclusive, we can't disclose. When you talk about transparency, we see a road is being constructed, but the locals only know that the road is going to be worked upon. So how do we get transparent enough to attain the levels you're talking about? What isn't being done, even despite having the laws in place?
Yes, when we talk about transparency, we mean that public information should be proactively disclosed. For example, in public procurement, Section 46 of this PPDA Act provides for disclosure. And the government has invested money to put up a government procurement portal where procurement information should be disclosed.
Okay.
Now, we have done a study in the health sector where we have found that only 1% of the data is disclosed. And that in the last 6 years, 7 entities of the 20 entities which we studied in that sector had not disclosed anything. That's not being transparent. That's not being accountable. And we believe that, you know, if these entities were doing something good, they would be happy to, you know, disclose it. They would be happy to respect and follow the law. They are not. And overall, 1% of the data being disclosed means that, you know, overall, there is lack of transparency. And our index here, so which we released last week, shows exactly the same thing. And also, transparency would require that for information which has not been proactively disclosed, when citizens request for that information under the Access to Information Act, they should get it within 21 days as required under the law. What we see is disregard of the law, refusal of requests with impunity, and lack of goodwill. For example, an information request we filed to the National Medical Stores for public information, where data we saw from the government procurement portal, we felt that, you know, more information would be needed. And they asked us to pay 10 million shillings in order to access this information. So there's not going to be a win against corruption in this regard. Now, we also recommend that there's need to address the issue of perception. Dr. Patricia here has said that the law applies equally. The law sees everyone the same way. But is this what the public perceives? If that is not the case, then it is going to be very, very difficult. A situation where you have a very senior official in government justifying that recruitment of, you know, family members is okay, even without procedure, that is okay. And this view is not challenged. In my view, would be an invitation to say that everyone, wherever they are, they should do the same. So I would expect that the inspectors of government would be interested in these cases and ask for more information, ask for clarification, and the public should be informed whether that is okay or it is not okay. But if it remains unchallenged, you know, and it involves, you know, people at the highest level of government, coordinating government business, you know, leading, you know, various institutions of government, I think that is going to be a disservice in the fight against corruption. I was pleased last week to see that the inspectorate invited someone who, you know, media reported that the person had bought public land worth billions at, I think, 800,000 shillings. That the inspectors were inviting this person to provide some, you know, information.
Information, yes.
I think that was a good thing. Things of this nature should be encouraged. If the Prime Minister says, no, it is okay, you know, for someone to be appointed, and their only qualification is being my relative or daughter or that,
then that would be.
I think.
So we are still looking at the issue of perception of
So
the office.
that should be.
Well, time is also much on my side, but there's a very interesting message I want to read to you, and this comes in from Ben. He says, in execution of the IGG's duties, who checks their integrity in case one is being compromised by the corrupt individuals giving them money? The office, we need also to do some checking there, because it does a very big role if empowered very well.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Ben, for raising that. We need to check ourselves. We believe in leadership by example. That is why even when we talk about the roadmap to verification, we want to begin with ourselves within the office of the inspectorate. You've said, well, there are instances of mistrust where some members of staff within the inspectorate are most likely to be compromising. Well, we have got the Directorate of Special Investigations and III, and even us within, we are now very keen, because we have been advised on several occasions that we need to do some house cleaning. So we are actually in the process of doing that. We have come up with policies and guidelines within the inspectorate to ensure that areas which expose our staff is under check and control. And I believe together, if you know of any instance out there, if you came out and reported, we'll swing into action. I would also like to add to what Gilbert has alluded to, that issues of nepotism, especially in government departments, ministries, need to be wiped out. That's why we are saying this anti-corruption work needs to be mainstreamed in all government agencies, departments, and ministries, so that they come up with their own internal mechanisms of dealing with it. This example of nepotism is very, very bad, and it is an offense within the Anti-Corruption Act, and punishable, by the way. For instance, I'm appointed as Deputy IGG, then you come to my office and find that from the cleaner, office attendant, PPS, and everybody else around me is actually from my ethnic background, is my relative, is my brother, cousin, in-law, and so on, then it raises many question marks. It should be highly discouraged, and it should not be something we should be involved in. Thank you very much.
Well, in the interest of time, Gilbert, let me have your final remarks in a minute, please, as we wind up.
Yeah, I think, thank you very much, and thank you, dear listeners and viewers. Fighting against corruption has a lot to do with the environment. And there cannot be a win against corruption when you don't have independent and free media. There cannot be a win against corruption when you don't have independent civil society organizations. Now, as it is, every day now we see, things that seem to threaten this independence of these important institutions. And the IG needs to, to recognize the work of these CSOs and play a key role in ensuring that, their independence, their regulation is done in a favorable manner, in a way to promote the war to win the war against corruption.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Gilbert, and of course that brings in also the issue of whistleblowers. Madam Patricia, Doctor, as we wind up, your final remarks, of course factoring in the issue of whistleblowing, and bestly how we can see that you get the right information, then act upon that.
Thank you very much. We have got the Whistleblower Act, Whistleblower Protection Act in place, which I was honored to participate in drafting, actually, and its regulations as well. And this law basically encourages citizens out there to come out and report cases of corruption. And like Gilbert has alluded to, fighting corruption needs strong partnership. So we need to build strong partnership and strategic alliances with all agencies involved in the fight against corruption, including the civil society, because the civil society have been the strongest partners in the fight against corruption. And citizens out there are very key partners as well in the fight against corruption, because if they do not come out to report these cases, ideally we would be having no job. So we encourage citizens out there to come out and report these cases of corruption, maladministration, nepotism, abuse of office. We have seen people using our government vehicles for loading matoke for loading their personal staff, for loading agricultural produce, for loading building materials, please come out and report so that we take action on those cases and deal with those, so that we have responsible people occupying places of position in government ministries and departments. So we also encourage citizens out there to be keen, especially when it comes to planning for projects in their different constituencies, and be able to monitor and ensure that it is the right work being done. And even the people responsible, do not just bombard the citizens out there with a road or this project. Involve them in planning, give them the information, equip them with a plan so that they are able to come out to monitor. And together we will win the fight against corruption.
Well, I want to thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Gilbert Sendaula, who comes from, he's the Africa Senior Regional Coordinator, that is COST, that aims at ensuring there is transparency in the construction sector, but also Deputy IGG, that is Dr. Patricia Achan Okiria, for having found time this morning. We hope we shall be having more opportunity to host you, and please, when we call upon you, respond timely. We want to thank you so much. She's been very clear. Report and leave the rest to her to handle. So let's ensure that we perfect our art as citizens. Corruption concerns all of us because we all lose. Don't just pay a deaf ear, turn the other side. Let's report and then hold the office accountable for not taking action. Have a lovely day. I'll leave you with Ruben to